I loved what I did. I loved the travel industry. I loved my company. I had a great life, but I'm like, I think I need to go after this. Successful or not, I kind of owe it to myself to try something new, right? 17 years of my whole adult life in one place. But I knew I loved my own health and wellness journey, and I understood where the challenge people were going to face is. And I was like, look, I am going to help people do this. And to your earlier point, who knows how that'll evolve, right? My assumption is that a Lively will be very successful because of what we're thinking about doing. But if a Lively serves and I serve to inspire other people to even step up their game or think about it differently, or think of my old industry to think about how to service people differently, then I'm going to be a happy guy.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. Are you craving a social life without the hangover? I'd encourage you to join Zero Proof. It's a lighthearted community diving into all things connection, lifestyle, and fun without the drinks. From wellness tips and product highlights to real life stories and every way to have a blast beyond the bar. Zero Proof has you covered. Be a part of the Zero Proof movement and take your social game up a notch. It's honestly one of my favorite newsletters. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for you all. Check it out. And if you enjoy it, tell them that Mile 40 sent you over. Again, check out Zero Proof. Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I very greatly appreciate it. I hope everybody's year is off to a great start. I want to thank you all for the continued support. Your reviews mean a lot. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit follow or subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Check out the show notes. Pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. There's a discount code in there. I will sign it, send it out myself. Really excited for today's guest. Today I have Lou Zameryka. He brings 25 plus years of expertise to the travel, hospitality, and tech industries. During his notable 17-year tenure at Booking.com, he spearheaded enterprise commercial strategy and negotiations, playing a key role in the company's transformation into an industry giant. His leadership extends beyond the corporate world. He has dedicated significant time to the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International, where he not only headed its largest chapter as president, but also shaped policy on the Americas board. When he's not focused on business, you're going to find him training for his next distance running event. This dedication to pushing personal boundaries mirrors his professional approach, built on resilience, strategic thinking, and continuous improvement. Today, Lou lends his expertise to organizations at the crossroads of wellness and hospitality, and he's an advisor, investor, and board member, helping shape the future of these evolving industries. His reputation for fostering innovation, building exceptional teams stems from an infectious optimism and natural curiosity. Through his latest venture, which we're going to talk about today, Lively.com, Lou helps others maximize their well-being and extend their healthy years through evidence-based approaches. Lou, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course, man. I'm excited. So what's your next race?
I got the New York City half coming up in March. So it's 2 days before my 45th birthday. So I'm very excited. It's my first New York Roadrunners race, actually.
Really?
I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and tons of my team have ran New York Roadrunners, but I've basically saved the big races for always out of town, where I could maybe bring my family, get a hotel room close to the start, make it more convenient for the large races. And so, yeah, weirdly enough, it's my first.
Wow. So we're going to geek out about this a little bit, because just before we hopped on, we found out you and I are about a town away from each other, which we didn't know. So what's been your favorite race thus far internationally?
I've had a bunch. I think the most interesting enough, I think it was a very short race, but it was the most unique. So there's this thing called the Rolex Roar at the 24, right? It's an endurance car racing race that's put on by IMSA, which is like the Formula One, if you will, of the US. And a buddy of mine, he's Dutch. We met on an airplane going back and forth for my Booking.com business. He's a race car driver. So they're doing a 24-hour race that weekend. But before the race starts, they have a 5K on the track, right? So really the Daytona Speedway, one of the most famous tracks. I think that was kind of the most memorable because I went out there and like put it down hard for the 5K early in the morning. And then he went out and raced for 24 hours with his teammates and we watched and everything. So I think that was kind of the most memorable and fun. Definitely not the longest, but just, in terms of setting and scene for a couple of days, I love that one.
That is so cool. How long have you been a distance runner?
I got back into it, I'd say almost 10 years ago. So I ran in high school, then I stopped, and I kind of always accessed running as an area of fitness. But I got very serious about it as we were building booking.com. Basically, I mean, if you want to get a little bit into that backstory, I started at booking.com from my bedroom, which I grew up actually in the neighborhood I live in now with my wife and kids. So just a few blocks away after Priceline, a much more known company at the time, purchased this company called bookings.nl. So the entire Americas was my remit, and it was myself there in a bedroom, working, in a spare bedroom. I then maybe 7 years in, I'd say, it started to get just to be such a massively large company team. And I was working on these very long negotiation cycles. And I wanted something that was just for me and my performance, if you will, right? The feedback loop from being an initial kind of sales and account management person when the scoreboard moves for every action you take. I've always loved that. I've been a competitive guy. I've liked to watch the metrics. And as a company gets bigger, and now, Booking's 150, $160 billion company, you kind of lose a bit of that feedback loop. So I wanted to gain it. And you also put on throughout life all of these different roles, right? So I was then a husband, a father, this employee, a leader of a team, and I just wanted to be Lou. So I remember saying it was probably around this time of year, saying to my then boss, our managing director, that I was going to focus on, getting back into competitive running to kind of shed some of those layers and get that instant feedback loop. And I was sure it was going to help me even show up for the next 7 or 8 years as an even stronger contributor to the company and the team. And so that's what I set along doing. So 7 years ago, I was just said, you know what? I'm going back to training. I'm not going to just run for fitness. Like I'm going to run and push myself. So
Amen to that, man. I mean, I'm right there with you. I think I actually started about 7 years ago, 2017, maybe now 8 years ago. And it's funny that once it became a big part of my life, I started to really be able to contextualize where it played a role in helping me show up in other areas of my life. And to that point, around how I show up day to day in my professional life, how I show up as a husband, as a father. I know the one thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I'm either getting my run in, I'm getting my workout in, and it's focal to who I am. And it helps me to that point about like you want to show up as Lou. It helps me show up as Bishoy and kind of distinguish myself, in everything that I do. So that's so awesome, and it's so cool because going in this morning, woke up, knew I had a podcast with Lou, did not know this is how we were going to kick things off. So this is an awesome way to get things started. So you said you grew up around here. We're out on Long Island, and you are in the Mineola area.
yep.
Okay, cool. Talk to me a little bit about childhood, what life was like for you growing up, just so we paint a picture for the audience before we kind of navigate into where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Actually, my like where I grew up in my hometown plays a pretty focal part of my life. I mean, like it does for many people. Williston Park, where I live, so right by Mineola, is basically a suburb of New York City. Right, most people, it's a commuter town. You could walk to a train station, and that's what most people do. Kind of middle class, upper middle class people, either working on Wall Street or firemen, cops, teachers, nurses, things like that. Um, I grew up, it's such a small community that it's multi-generational, right? So when a house becomes available for sale here, someone else buys it from the community. And you're talking about most people are 3 or 4 generations. I grew up in a household 3 generations because I lived with my grandparents, my parents, and then myself and my brother. I married the girl from around the block from me. So, neither one of us have made it too far, but that's not uncommon here. And I looked at that as basically you could look at it kind of two ways and say, oh, I never left here. Or you can look at it as a strong foundation for what you do otherwise, right? And that's the way I chose to look at it. I said, look, I now have this great foundation, a community where if my children were still babies, like you could go run up to a house here, hand the person that answers the door a baby and say, I'll be back in 10 minutes, just watch this baby. And like you are not worried, and that person does not have a care in the world because, basically everybody knows each other. And because I was going to spend most of my time traveling, I spent pre-COVID for 15 years, I was on the road basically every week. So I knew that as we started to have a family, I wanted my wife and children to have people around them. So not just my in-laws nearby and my parents nearby, but all of this extended kind of friends and family. And it gave me a really powerful base for going out and exploring the world. And same with them. Like they knew when they came home, they had an entire community. They had great friends. They had people who cared about them, and beyond kind of just superficial caring, but really a deep community bond. And that meant that you could go anywhere and do anything because you were always going to come back to this kind of strong home and there were people rooting for you. So that's the way I looked at it. It was also super convenient because JFK Airport and LaGuardia are only about half an hour away. So I could also fly to anywhere in the world
Yeah.
pretty easily.
Yeah, and it's a quick ride to the city. You're not,
Yeah.
so you're kind of really well positioned there. Did you have any siblings?
I had a younger brother, so he's 2 years younger than me. He still lives nearby, about 10 minutes away. Um, yeah, he was even for a time in the same industry as I am. So we had a good time.
Talk to me. Well, where did you go to school? Like around here? Or did you go away for college?
Yeah, so I went to Fordham University, and then I transferred actually to Johnson and Wales in Miami. So Johnson and Wales has a few locations focused on hospitality. The Miami school is no longer there, but that campus, it was either that or Rhode Island, and I wasn't going to go any colder. So South Beach seemed like a pretty good place to have a hotel career, so, or at least get started. So that's
So,
where I went.
question: you go down to Miami for school, you don't get the itch to potentially stay down there?
So I do love the warm weather, but actually back then I came back around September 11th, just right after September 11th, because all of the hospitality jobs dried up in general, but especially in Miami. It was about to go into its high season. So November would have been sold out hotel rooms and everything. And instead, the hotels couldn't hire anybody, had to let go of all their staff. And if you brought basically a bag of canned food along with having dinner at one of the hotel restaurants, you got a room for the night. And myself and a few students were asked to basically task force throughout all of Miami Beach, working in any job in any hotel because there was only a few of us in the hotel school that actually had hotel working experience. So I spent a year there doing that, and then just came back to New York because there was just basically no work. Plus, I wanted to kind of get back home. And Miami back then, now we're talking about 20 years ago, 24 years ago. It was a nice place, but it was a few streets. It didn't hold the candle at all to New York City, right? I was used to walking down any street or any avenue at any time and finding something amazing to do. Miami was cool. I love the beach. I love the warm weather, and but it was basically a nightclub scene back then.
Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to remember what was the name of that really big club over there. Oh, was it Mansion? Was that the name of the club?
There was
Ah,
Mansion, there was
yeah,
Space, there was Crowbar.
that's
Crowbar is, I
right.
think, partially owned by Madonna. So I mean, I was a on-demand bartender down there too.
Yeah.
So we would get brought to these different events that needed overflow bartenders, and yeah, it was cool, but just not what I was looking for
Yeah,
long
no, I
term.
remember because I was in college around that time. We were finishing up high school, going into college, and I remember like the scene was kind of bustling, and like all the kids were talking about going down there and going to those clubs, and you kind of felt like if you weren't in that mix, you didn't really know what was going on. So that's cool. It gives us a good lay of the land there. What made you want to go into the hospitality space?
Yeah, I kind of well, my journey was very lucky because I learned at an early age I wanted to go into hospitality. So we used to go to the same place on vacation twice a year because my brother and I kept saying, yes, we want to go back when our parents would ask. So they say, you want to go here? No, we want to go to, we went to this place called Woodlock Pines, which a lot of people from the tri state area and now even the country know because it's one of the top rated resorts and family resorts in the entire country every single year. It was magical, just a resort in the Poconos, but you could see everybody exuded hospitality, right? When you went there for your week of vacation, whether it was winter or summer, you basically booked the same week every year. The whole staff knew you. You couldn't believe, like, you looked at them like they were celebrities. They looked at you like you were a returning member of the family. And that was pretty magical to me. And I said, man, I would love to have a career where I can have that level of impact on people. Because there weren't, in my mind as a young teenager, you basically had like movie stars, athletes, and then those people that helped you with your vacation that you were going to really, really remember in a positive way in life, right? And it sounds crazy to put the hospitality worker there, but most people were going to spend 50 of their weeks working for those 2 weeks of vacation, maybe 3 weeks nowadays that they can get. So making that memorable mattered to me. And so instantly I said, I'm going into travel and hospitality. I loved the idea of traveling as well, but I wanted to play that part in people. And as I got a little bit older, it started to evolve and I started to understand that beyond just making sure people had a great vacation or trip, I experienced that when you step out of your comfort zone, that could be travel, that could be trying a new thing, whatever it is. When you step out of your comfort zone, an amazing thing happens. Your comfort zone expands and it does not contract, right? Like it doesn't snap back, it grows and stays there. And I realized that the more I can help people step out of their comfort zone and expand that, the better the world was going to be. And you see that through a lot of people in the travel industry that think about positive impact of getting people to new places to meet new cultures and new people. So it just kind of kept evolving, and I knew it was the world for me.
Well, to that point, you mentioned the fact that it kept evolving. It's a really wide industry. It's a wide touching, wide reaching industry. Um, Talk to me about where you, back then, where you thought you were going to be within the industry, and how that journey may have completely, flipped itself upside down from where you thought you were going to be.
Oh yeah, sure. And that is what happened. So very astute there and observing that that is likely to happen, right? So I started working in hotels once I was 18 at a Holiday Inn, got a job, tried to see, hey, do I really like this industry? I wanted to learn as much as I could in school. And now school back then for hospitality was not very well developed. You had basically a bunch of people that were in the industry that were serving as adjunct professors, and that's about it. It's since has developed very extensively, especially because of revenue management and obviously the digitization of every industry. But back then, I started working at a Holiday Inn, and I thought, hey, I need to be on the hotel property. That was where the magic would happen. And I went from there to do new hotel openings, right? So basically, buildings that were going to be built by usually a first time developer, their first time building a hotel. Maybe they owned apartment buildings or commercial. And I really enjoyed that. I got to open one of the top performing hotels back on Long Island when I came back from Miami. And then I got to open what became Condé Nast's hottest hotel in the world, which is the Hotel Gansevoort, the original one in New York City's meatpacking district. It basically created the standard for hotel rooftop pools, bars, food and beverage. And it was amazing between people going there for vacation or the business travelers. It was quite an experience. So that had me thinking, okay, I'd love to do something a little bit more broad than just one hotel at a time. Maybe developing a management portfolio, because that's what I was doing, hotel management, or even developing my own hotel collection. And to do that, I thought, well, I need to get exposed to the industry much more rapidly than like one hotel at a time, one hotel at a time. And I believe that I want to go regional. At the same time, a friend of mine who worked for Priceline came along and said, hey, we're buying this company. It's called bookings.nl. And I looked at the software they had and what the purpose of it was and what they were trying to achieve. And she said, look, we have this company now. We need somebody to develop it outside of the kind of five European countries it's in. People in key US markets like New York and Miami in the hotel industry. That's obviously where the international traveler is coming in. What do you think? Now, hotel openings are grueling, right? It's like living on a submarine. People think it's cool, but like you sleep in a hotel, you take an elevator down to the lobby, and now you're at work. That's work from home is now fun, but man, could you imagine you wake up, just take an elevator, and boom, you're in the middle of the action? It's kind of jarring. So, and it's 24/7. So when I heard, hey, I could work from home, but 9 to 5, no weekends, and I got a chance to look at kind of and interact with tons of hotels in different markets, I said, hey, this is for me. Now, little did I know that my thought of let me spend a year or two understanding what is online hotel distribution, what is revenue management strategy for multiple hotels. I'll spend a year or two learning that, and then I'll take what I learned and go back and build a management company. That year or two turned to 17 years, and the rest is kind of history. But the company just kept evolving, and it helped me scratch an entrepreneurial itch that I had within a larger organization because there were new departments to create, new teams to create, new positions, new initiatives. It never stopped.
Talk bookings.nl. What is the NL?
It was basically the Netherlands because it was booking.com is
Ah,
a Dutch-based company. So what happened was Priceline purchased bookings.nl and a company called Active Hotels, which are in the UK, and basically smashed them together. And that became what is now known as booking.com to everybody. But it was quite a journey because there were 70 people when I joined.
so you kind of had a front row seat to the evolution of this space, which I think is a space that every single person touches, but not everybody fully understands, right? Like just the other day, like I'm booking a trip to Tokyo right now. I'm running the Tokyo Marathon in March. So I have Expedia up, I have Booking.com up, I have Priceline up. I literally have no idea what I'm doing and why I'm looking at all these websites and flights.google.com and understand and hotels on Google and trying to understand if it really even matters that I'm looking at all four of these at once. What can you tell us about this game that we all play but know nothing about?
Yeah, it's quite a world. I mean, like anything, whether it's travel as a retail or consumer retail, clothing, whatever, where you're searching matters, but especially if you're, become a logged in member of something, right? All the deals are hidden behind some kind of membership or loyalty scheme, whether that's in travel at the hotel chain level or at the online travel agency level. I mean, you're doing the right thing to start with an online travel agency for two reasons. First, you're going to a destination that you're presumably unfamiliar with. So you need to get a lay of the land. So you really do need to start out, but you need more context maybe than Google Hotels is going to be able to provide you, right? So having some standardization between whether it's Expedia Group you choose or Booking.com you choose, that's going to already help you understand, like, okay, how am I comparing one thing to the other? What are my options? So I typically advise people to start with an online travel agency. And likely, if you're going to do multiple trips, stick with an online travel agency, because being a member of one of those groups is going to have the most versatility to it, right? Because today you might be looking for a hotel in Tokyo. Tomorrow you might be looking to go to Miami Beach. The next day you might be looking for a home in Vermont for some skiing. And really, only in these online travel agencies, you're going to be able to stay consistently in one program, accessing discounts and other benefits. So I'd say yes, start there. Like anything, asking friends is still like number one. So even if you're going to do the transaction with an online travel agency, people used to laugh and say, "Wow, you must get the best hotel discounts working at
That's
Booking."
exactly what
And
I'm
actually,
thinking.
yeah, but I didn't, right? Because I was our lead negotiator, especially. So I couldn't ask hotels for anything. So, they paid me well and we had our own program. So that was nice. But I didn't get any discounts. The biggest benefit from working in this industry was that, especially back when, before social media, I could go, like my wife and I went to Croatia. I sent one email to a fellow runner and my friend Iva in Croatia, who handled Croatia and a few other countries for us at the time. I said, I'm going to Croatia. Like, where am I staying? Where should I eat? What should I, whatever? And, one email came back with like, you go here, you go there, avoiding all the tourist traps, only going to the best things. And I just took that, right? That planning was done, right? Pick one of three links to book the hotel. That was the biggest benefit, is that I have well-informed friends that can give me the real nitty gritty on it. Now, again, social media helps a lot with that, but I'd say online travel agencies and social media are the best blend to work with.
To that point, anytime I take any of these trips, first thing I'm doing is reaching out to someone who's already been there and saying, "Send me your itinerary,
Yeah.
and tell me what you liked, what you didn't like." So that adds up. That's awesome insight. So talk to me about 17 years at Booking.com. Look, for our generation, that's a lot in one place. And then I know you kind of, you said it, and it kind of felt like it went by so quick because you were probably enjoying what you were doing. Um, Talk to me about, throughout that period, did you ever feel like, I know you talk about the entrepreneurial itch, you talk about, getting that sense out of you, but, making the decision to actually leave somewhere where you had stability for 17 years is a big decision. So talk to me about just how many times you considered doing it, and what led you to actually doing it.
Yeah. It Again, great observation, because it was a combination, that of 17 years plus basically my entire adult life, if you will, in this one place, right? That's typically what I was reflecting on when I was thinking about it through it, and whether I should do it or not. And to your point, I loved what I did. So I love the travel industry. I love what I did at booking.com. Love the people I did it with, the culture. There was absolutely no reason to leave, right? Until I started to think about the reason I should leave, right? And that took time, took a lot of morning runs of juggling this through my head. So it became a little bit of a combination of two things, right? Uh, Finding a next level of my why. So I mentioned that I believe travel really help people. So like our vision and mission at booking.com was to make it easier for people to experience the world. And we established that as an early team, right? And it resonated with me because that's what I wanted. I knew the profound impact it could have positively on people and the world in general if more people experience more places and more other people. I started to then, as I was going through just my life in general, I started to get these exposures to what eventually I would realize was healthspan. And those exposures came in different ways, right? So I was about to turn 40, and I was at like Long Island's big running community annual awards. And so turning 40 in March, so it was like January of 2020. Weird time to be
Yeah.
doing it. Right? Hindsight, I had no idea what was
Interesting
happening.
timing. Yeah.
Yeah, no idea what was about to happen. But I started. They started the awards with the age groups in reverse. And two guys got up and got their age group award for the 90 to 95-year-old age group. And when they were up there, I remember saying to my teammate next to me, wow, like here I am thinking I'm going to move from runner to master's level runner, right? Turning 40. Meanwhile, I could run my entire life over again. And these guys would be waiting like a decade for me to get into their age group. So it just makes you realize how long life is, right? So oftentimes you think life is short, but I started to have these moments where I realized how long life was. We lived 2 winters in Costa Rica. And in Costa Rica, in our condo complex, the owners were a lot of older snowbirds from US and Canada. But they weren't like the older people we kind of left behind, if you will, here in the States. These people were up when I was up at 5 a.m. going out for a run, they were starting their day to go hiking together. When my kids came home from school at the end of the day, they were 75 years old jumping in the pool with the kids, teaching them that, a jackknife, or a can opener, not a cannonball makes a bigger splash. And so I looked and I said, man, life is long. Like, look at the way these people are doing it versus, even some of my own relatives that were falling apart at 60. And when I started to want to understand that, that's when I started to read in maybe 2021, early 2022 about health span and just basically the length of time you spend healthy, right? Not so much how long you live. And as I started to read about that, that's when I realized that there was this next like why moment for me and what I wanted to contribute, which was while everybody might have been interested in the past 20, 30, 40 years in longevity, I realized that potentially we were on the cusp of people realizing that modern medicine, whether that's pill bottles or surgeries, will keep them alive for a very long time. Potentially every year we go by, significantly longer, right? The issue is if you fall apart at age 60, 65, but you don't die till 95, what is happening to your life? Like no one's letting you die while you fall apart, right? That's 30 years, 40 years potentially you could spend not at your peak, but not basically being able to die. And I know that sounds like a morbid way to think about it a bit, but I realize that's going to become the focal point of people, right? Biohacking for longevity was a pretty challenging thing. Most people didn't do it because it had delayed gratification and a bad model, right? If you said to somebody, hey, I can get you 5 more years on the end of your life if you do all this weird stuff now, they're going to look at the weird stuff and say, I don't know, it's kind of weird. They're going to look at the cost and say, I don't know, it's a high cost. They're going to look at the outcome and say, you know what, I've seen a 90-year-old, you can keep those 5 years. But if you say to them, actually, you're going to live to 95, and there's 2 different ways you can do it, like this person, vibrant, or like this person falling apart. Suddenly it changes. And I said, I want to make sure that people understand that concept of health span and that I can help people live healthier longer. So it really took that transition of realizing on all these morning runs and reflections what I would go after. It had to be big enough because to your point earlier, like I loved what I did. I loved the travel industry. I loved my company. I had a great life, but I'm like, I think I need to go after this. Successful or not, I kind of owe it to myself to try something new, right? 17 years of my whole adult life in one place. That's my like pass to say, give it a shot, Lou. I knew I was an expert in my field, so like I could always go back if it's a disaster. But I knew I loved my own health and wellness journey, and I understood where the challenge people were going to face is. And I was like, look, I am going to help people do this. And to your earlier point, who knows how that'll evolve, right? My assumption is that a Lively will be very successful because of what we're thinking about doing. But if a Lively serves and I serve to inspire other people to even step up their game or think about it differently or think of my old industry to think about how to service people differently, then I'm going to be a happy guy.
If you know me, you know that I like to look good and feel good. As an endurance athlete who trains daily, I need my wardrobe to fit the mold. Roan creates performance-driven clothing for your active lifestyle. Each piece is designed for versatility and made with integrity to outfit you for an active life lived on your own terms. The Roan promise is to help you move forever forward. Use code MILE40 for 20% off online and in-store for new customers only. Visit www.rhone.com, that's Rhone spelled RHONE, or find your local store and move forever forward starting today. No, I mean, that's so awesome for a multitude of reasons, because it's so necessary. And I really think, right around when you started, considering this is when this topic came to the forefront of a lot of minds. Um, it's also really cool to see generational shifts in behavior. Like, I want to give some kudos to Gen Z, 'cause I don't feel like they get enough kudos sometimes, but I do feel like they kind of looked at a lot of the behavior at the generations that came before them, and they realized that, like, something had to change so that way, by the time you do get to that 90, 95 year old, the assumption isn't going to be that you're decaying. It's going to be that, you know if you choose to, you can actually, keep living, during that period. But what I want to kind of ask you is, the the mindset is right. Like, the way that you're approaching this is right, but how do you turn this into a business? Like, how do you then kind of like, uh, this is something that it's one of those things that everybody wants. People are probably willing to pay for, but they don't know what it is exactly that they're investing in sometimes.
Yeah. And so I thought about how I would turn my newfound kind of purpose and my talents into a business, right? And I thought about this a good amount. So I informed the team and the CEO at Booking that I was leaving a year before anybody else knew. I thought about it for a year prior to even informing him. Um, and what I thought about was, well, what am I going to do with this knowledge, right? And I kind of went through my scaling background, right? And I said to myself, it would be pretty cool to coach people on this. And then I said, well, then I'd have to go back and get accredited in coaching, then build my notoriety for coaching, and ultimately, coaching doesn't scale very well, right? As a person, right? I thought about then saying, okay, well, what if I took already accredited coaches from these different areas? Because basically, what I stumbled on while doing my early healthspan work was, no matter how many uh, papers you read, no matter how many books you read, it kind of boils down to that you need to have 5 areas of your life all in some sort of balance, right? Being addressed. So that's fitness, nutrition, sleep and recovery, mindset, and social connection. If you can balance those and access those, based on all the research, you seem to be in good shape for living your best life your entire life. So I was like, what if I got professionals from those 5 areas and put them in one place? And now you've started to see that over the past year or two, these functional medicine clinics are starting to broaden out, and they're not just doing medicine; they're doing fitness. They're not just doing fitness; they're doing recovery. So I'm glad people are doing that. But that's what I thought. I literally took my old '80s brain or '90s brain and said, all right, what if I open like the Weight Watchers for healthspan and just brought in the different people you need and you can go get tuned up? But we were living between Costa Rica, New York, and I spend my summers elsewhere. I was like, I can't do brick and mortar. Okay. So kept going running, kept thinking about, well, what the hell are you going to do, Lou? Then I thought about those 5 areas again. And I said to myself, well, those are five big subsegments of what people generally call wellness, right? I said that would make for a pretty good marketplace structure. And I knew online marketplaces from my background of Booking. And so I looked, and there was no dominant wellness marketplace, right? No one place where you could find your fitness equipment, your recovery equipment, your nutrition, and all that. I said, all right, maybe we should build a marketplace. Let's get all these products together. But then the next realization I had helped Andrew. Now, I was now speaking about it with a co-founder who I've known for a really long time. And we started to think, okay, it's great to get it all in one place, but to your point, Bishoy, like how do we make it like better than just putting it all in one place? Why will people buy? And then I realized that health and wellness is unlike any other consumer area when it comes to what the consumer's attempting to do, right? So when you buy something in health and wellness, you have generally a goal and you're tracking progress to that goal now, so more than ever, right? With
Yeah.
Whoops and Garmin's, and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, we might as well be wrist
Yeah.
twins over. But so I'm like, wow, could I imagine what myself and our machine learning and our design teams could have done at Booking if we had that level of data, right? Not just behavioral data on the site, but other data. And so what we're building with Alively is actually a shopping experience where you can integrate your wearable device or any smart health device you have, right, with your shopping account. And then we start to understand your preferences for what you purchase, and we link them back to the data and the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? So a simple example would be, let's say you're trying to sleep better. Well, you could just go out there and go on Amazon and find like 4,000 things that'll answer, the query sleep better. But that's not what people are looking for. They're not looking for endless options. They're looking for answers to questions. So what we would do instead is say, hey, give us access to the Whoop device. We're going to take a look at what sleep better actually potentially means for you, right? There's usually 4 or 5 kind of problems with sleep. And then we're going to get you started with addressing that problem and say, hey, based on research, this type of thing is likely to help you with this type of sleep problem. And we start to then understand the customer's preferences. So if I showed you a magnesium pill, if I showed you chamomile tea, if I showed you an eye mask or breath work, even, we're going to start to understand, well, what did you pick, right? Okay, if you pick breath work, you might be more willing to prioritize taking action versus taking a supplement. And so we basically use machine learning to take the data that you have and guide you to a better purchase decision. Or after you even make a purchase decision, we start to tell you whether that is having the impact you're looking for, right? So if you bought that magnesium, we could say, hey, the last 20 people who bought magnesium saw 5 more minutes of deep sleep registered within 14 days. And if you're seeing it, great. If you're not seeing it, we can offer, hey, do you need a reminder every night to help? So it's basically habit change and health coaching through your e-commerce behaviors, as well as helping you improve your wellness spending to actually just target at a discovery stage or at an adherence stage how you're doing versus your goals.
It's awesome to hear you articulate it now, but I'm sure it took you some time to get here, to where you are today, right? Like I think, um, to your point, like you don't just wake up and build this. Right? And when you're pivoting from the stability of a career, at booking.com, and then you kind of enter this new arena, as we've seen from many guests that have come on this show who are founders in this space, essentially, there's always going to be hiccups along the way, and there's always going to be moments where you need to consider either complete changing the business model, perhaps even throwing away the business model, and maybe just walking away altogether. How long has this been now? How many years has this been?
So actually, like in 2 weeks, Alively will be a year old. We spent a couple of months prior, kind of planning it before we started the company. So yeah, very, very early on. And you are 100% correct, right? Like we have a big vision for what we want to achieve, right? Help everybody live healthier longer. If we focus on that vision and take what we've learned, both myself and my co-founder Andrew have had previous careers, right? So we don't have to take necessarily the specifics from those previous careers, but certainly the general lessons learned and the wisdom we've accumulated and apply it to achieving that vision. And you're right, Bishoy, that might look like zigging and zagging. That might look like going one way, throwing out a plan the other way. That might look like through a great conversation, having a whole new area unlocked. And you have to have the not only the resilience to deal with that, but a little bit of that uh, past experience to understand how not to let that knock you off your mental game. Right, mentally and emotionally, it'll be hard. But if you look at competition as saying, hey, like we see slight competitors, right, or things poking around in this area, and it's like, oh, thank God we're not crazy. You know what I mean? Like if you see no
No, to
competitors,
your
you go
point,
like,
I was just gonna say,
I'm not too crazy.
look, this space isn't going anywhere, and it's a space that's going to continue to grow. And the truth of the matter is, somebody's gonna figure it out. Like, someone's gonna figure it out, and, it's something that there's a huge appetite for. And to my point earlier, like, it spans generations. There are people who are older who realize, "Oh, no, like, I should have been focused on this before, like, let me play catch up." There are people like you and me who are, are you technically a millennial, or are you right above the
I think
millennial?
I'm on the right. I was born in 1980. I think I'm literally on that cusp of
Yeah, you're
millennial.
right. You're right on the cusp, where it's like we were kind of like in the middle. Like, like we probably made some decisions when we were younger that we probably wish we could have changed. But now we're kind of, in this space where we're realizing we still have the opportunity. And then you have that younger generation that's like, I think, more open to doing things right, from a younger age. So there's a huge market to be had here. Um, it's just a matter of who's going to put it together the right way, and make it easy for the consumer to not have to think twice around it. And there's a lot of different modalities here, right? Like to your point earlier, there's a lot of people, and I was just talking to an anesthesiologist the other day, a really successful anesthesiologist, like many other people in the medical field, with not the best things to say about our healthcare system, who basically he moved to, you'll appreciate this, he moved from being a top anesthesiologist at NYU to Riverhead. Right. So now he's in Riverhead. All the practices out there are like, what are you doing over here? Like, why are you even here? And he's opening up his own, concierge medical practice, because he's like, someone has to, take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that was the thing that I realized most when leaving my old career, right? Obviously, travel is a massive industry. But when I finally told our clients at Booking.com and the industry more broadly that I was leaving, there were tons of people that reached out trying to hire me, trying to just get some time or advice. And I said to one of my buddies, like, man, it's crazy. Like everybody's looking for me. It's nuts. And he goes, well, Lou, let's think about this for a second. How much is Booking Holdings worth? I was like, $150 billion. How many $150 billion companies are there? Well, yeah, I guess there's not many. And everybody knows you were there for 17 years. You dealt with $1 billion negotiations, right? And why I say this is just because if I go back and had that conversation, even just 12 years ago, people didn't know who Booking was, right? Like if I walked through an airport and I got stopped by security and they asked me why I went to Amsterdam for like the 500th time, I would say I was there for work. And when I said who I worked for, I always had to say Priceline because like nobody in the United States and barely even in Europe knew who Booking was. But you fast forward to your point about wellness being a big industry. It's a massive industry. And there are no Booking.com scale players yet. But in travel, there are multiple, right? There's Booking, there's Airbnb, there's Expedia. You're talking about companies worth tens and tens and tens of billions, if not over $100 billion in the case of Airbnb or even Uber and Booking. So the opportunity is there. And it doesn't just defer to only the early founders, right? Booking, like I said, was 70 people when I started. When I left, it was 24,000 people. And endless people came through that, just like Google, just like Facebook, and built careers out of it and went and did other things in those spaces. So I think to anybody who's working on anything in this wellness space, you know, or in any industry for that matter, like you have a contribution to make towards this vision. And you generally have a shared vision with your industry. So the game is only over when you decide you're going to stop trying to contribute. Just contribute, find good people to put around you, and you and they will go further than you could ever imagine.
What's been the most difficult part of this portion of your journey? Like, and when I say this portion, I'm saying, what's been the most difficult realization of being an entrepreneur?
Probably how slow it will feel, right? So it goes slow and then fast breakthrough. And I think for me personally, because I then came from a very well resourced business, it's just amazing to always realize like, oh, there's nobody else. Like, it's Andrew and I, and we do have other team members and agencies we use. But in general, you just go, oh, yeah, there is no like cavalry coming, right? It's like, we just got to get this done, figure it out, muscle through. I think that's been some of the more like humbling, interesting experiences. Like, okay, it goes slow unless we move it really fast, and to move it really fast, we have to be really well articulating our vision to our fellow kind of stakeholders. So it's just been, yeah, it's been an interesting one to go back this early, right?
What I want to drive at here is, and I'm going to bring this full circle, because one of the things I picked up on throughout this conversation several times is you would say, and then I went on a run. And that's where I thought of this, or that's where I came up with this idea, or that's where, the mind was working. And I'm very similar to you when it comes to a lot of my big creative ideas come on runs, or even a lot of my problem solving comes on run. And it could be as simple as, you know, how do I fix, this conversation I just had with my wife that I feel like could have gone better. And then I go on a run. I'm like, oh, like I should have said this, or I should have said that, or like this is how I can fix that, or how I can fix that. Um, and so what I want to get at here is clearly that was a big part of your life and has played a role into it. And I want to dig into where you built up the resilience to handle, the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. Because the way the podcast is shaping up right now is, um, this guy had a really successful career at booking.com, and he, made the decision that a lot of us wanted to make, and he's doing something that we can all get behind. But where did he build his toughness to, like, swallow what might be coming his way?
Yeah. So it comes from different angles, right? It's a stacking effect, if you will. So growing up from my household, right, my parents and my grandparents, then later into the high school I went to like a private old boys high school on
Oh, you
Long
went to
Island.
Chaminade?
Yeah,
I went to St. Anthony's.
there you
So,
go.
so we're rivals.
So
Good.
we could just end this podcast
Yeah.
now.
So great.
But you know, everything that I was instilled with as a young person was to be of service to other people, right? To be good to other people, to be of service. So you take that service part, right? Then I had naturally a lot of curiosity. And I believe, like, if you ask me what type of people I want on my team, I want curious people. I want people that are resilient. And when you take that curiosity, it creates like an introspection, right? Where you're willing to just question things, whether that's stuff you see in the outside world or things you think, right? So you start with this base of service, you move into curiosity where you're thinking and being thoughtful. I really like, if people ever consider me thoughtful, I'm happy about that. And I don't mean like thoughtful, like, oh, what a kind and nice person. I mean like full of thought, right? Like really giving thought to things. I then realized, interestingly enough, this guy Jocko Willink came up with this book called Discipline Equals Freedom, and he's a big discipline guy. When I was 18, I tattooed discipline on my right leg because I always believed that if I did everything I was supposed to do, I could then do anything I want to do. So I would do all my chores so that no one would say, "Hey Lou, do you want to go do this?" And I have to say, "Oh no, I can't because of this." Or I couldn't fully enjoy something because something was hanging over my head, right? So I took that service orientation, that curiosity, that discipline. As the discipline had to start going longer and longer, new hotel openings are grueling. There's just endless problems in them. I started to realize that discipline wasn't actually enough or the right thing. What I wanted was resilience, because the image of resilience for me was things that could bend back and snap back into, into shape, which meant that they could take this problem and they could snap into service again, right? Because service was my core foundation. And so as I built all that, the thoughtfulness, the curiosity, the resilience, I looked for like an outlet, I guess, to constantly hone it, which became running, right? Whether I knew it or not. And for me, it might be running. For another person, it could be rowing, it could be working out. But the idea that people don't get to, like, I do it at the morning, but like start their day or find like an hour to 90 minutes to be in their own mind, like getting endorphins running and getting thoughts running. It's crazy to me now. I'm like, how could people not allow themselves this? Because it's basically a superpower. So I took all those stacking kind of traits and I honed them through just distance running or being in my own head.
I love that. That is the perfect answer. And I think honestly the perfect way for us to close this out. And, I want to make sure that the listeners kind of take away from that last tidbit around the fact that whether it's running or whatever it may be, as Lou was suggesting, and I think Lou would agree with this, it's not about the distance, it's not about the pace, it's not even necessarily about how you look. It's more so around all those things, all those factors that you had mentioned right there. A, you're doing a service to yourself, and by doing a service to yourself, it it shows you the benefit of serving others. Number 1. Number 2, you are employing discipline to the highest degree by just showing up. Forget again how long you're out there, your pace, so on and so forth. It's really just by showing up, because that's the hardest part, especially out here. And I think I could see behind me in the window. Yep, it's snowing out there, especially showing up on days like this. And so if you're out there and you're listening to this episode, that's what I really want you to take away from this is, before any major decision is made, and Lou's clearly had quite the trajectory professionally and personally, he's taken it upon himself to make sure that he's worked out that muscle and allowed that muscle to help drive, his brain, his creativity, and his thoughtfulness, essentially. So, Lou, thank you for coming on, for letting us in on your journey, for giving us your insight, and for showing us that while the road is never necessarily straight, it can ultimately lead you to places that will drive happiness, not just for you, but for those around you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You got it, my man. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.